Hello, and welcome to today's edition of Museum Moments. I'm Molly Dubin, and I'm the curator with the Jewish Museum Milwaukee. And today, we thought it would be very fitting to revisit a 2014 exhibit we had here called Jews Who Rock, which was really fantastic on many levels. And we thought it was particularly fitting because right now we would normally be at some stage experiencing one of the myriad of wonderful bands that Summerfest has to offer. But due to the pandemic, we're kind of in a Jones for music mode, if you will. So what better way to celebrate music and all that it means to us through a look at Jews Who Rock. So Jews Who Rock really examine the Jewish influence in the rock and roll genre and in the popular music genre. And Jewish individuals have really been involved with music in the rock scene going back to its very beginnings. And that has a lot to do with availability. When it kind of rock and roll came onto the scene, it was a little bit newer, and there were advents that allowed Jewish individuals who may have not had opportunities to get into other careers or go on other career paths to get in on the ground floor with the music industry. We had a number of individuals who were well-known songwriters, including the likes of Paul Simon, Carole King, who early on in their careers didn't there were promoters, people who didn't think they had the look to be on stage. So they wrote songs for others. But of course, as history has righted itself, and we all know, they went on to be incredible performers in their own right. So with that, we're going to just embark on a mini crash course. We're going to do part 1 today and part 2 on Thursday. So we're going to look at some of the well-known musicians, songwriters, promoters who have contributed so much to the music and rock industry. So with that, I'm going to share my screen here, so bear with me. And we are going to start our slideshow from the beginning. And here we have a great screenshot of the intro graphic from the Jews Who Rock exhibit, a musical history tour. So thought it would be fitting to start with a Milwaukee connection. So this is Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. And there actually were 2 Jewish individuals who were members of this group. Stan Lynch, who was a longtime drummer. He also toured extensively with Bob Dylan and wrote and produced songs for the likes of Don Henley, the Eagles, the Mavericks, and others. But who we want to talk about in particular here is the second Jewish band member, who is Howie Epstein. And in this image, he is in the kind of off-white shirt on the far left there. So Howie Epstein. So he was born in Milwaukee. He went to Nicolet High School, which is kind of amazing. He's probably best known for his work as a bassist with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. He did have a brief solo career. He really came into his love of music fairly early on. He was born in 1955, but his father was a top record producer in the 50s and 60s. And he really became very interested, and that was how he kind of got on his way. He happened to be lucky enough to be somewhere that Tom Petty was in the midst of a band change, happened to see him perform, and brought him on tour. And he made his first live tour performance in 1982, and had a tremendous career. Unfortunately, like many rock icons, the lifestyle lends itself to a bit of excess, and he fell to that excess due to complications, from drug use at the age of 47. But of course, leaves an amazing legacy, and we're thrilled to have that connection here in Milwaukee. So, Yoan Winner. This may be someone who maybe is not known visually, but certainly whose creations are well known. So Yoan Winner was the co-founder, he still is, the co-founder and publisher of the very well-known music and politics magazine, Rolling Stone, which was first established in 1967. He also happens to be the co-owner of the Men's Journal and US Weekly magazines, and has done many, many other things in his career. But of course, Rolling Stone, a very iconic magazine, he actually, to get it off the ground, borrowed $7,500 from his family. And of course, it turned into an incredibly successful, iconic endeavor. He did some of the most memorable interviews for the magazine, including with Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and Bono, among them. So this is a young shot of Yoan, and this is what he looks like today. So thought we'd get a look at that. The other reason I thought it was fitting to talk about Yoan Winner is that this year's the 20th anniversary of the film Almost Famous. That was done in 2000, and that was loosely based on the life and experiences of writer and director Cameron Crowe. If you've seen the film, in which Kate Hudson plays this groupie, she's a Band-Aid and follows a fictitious band called Stillwater. And Patrick Fugit is the actor that plays this young journalist who really, at the age of 15, dupes some of the bigwigs at Rolling Stone, because he's a tremendous writer, gets to do an article and, winds up doing some great work for the Rolling Stone. So I thought that was a fitting mention there. If you haven't seen it, great film, Billy Crudup, many others. You should definitely check it out. Okay, so the next person I thought we'd talk about is Bill Graham, legendary concert promoter. So Bill Graham, I don't think a lot of people know, with the exception of through an exhibit that was put together a number of years ago, has a very complex history. So he was the youngest son of a family that immigrated from Russia to the United States prior to the rise of Nazism. His mother, who wound up being sent to Auschwitz and perishing there, had the forethought to send him to an orphanage. And he was then sent to France. From France, he was part of an exchange, pre-Holocaust exchange of Jewish children for Christian orphans. As a young adult, he wound up coming to the United States, settling in New York, wound up then heading out to San Francisco, to the West Coast, and getting into the music business. And if you do know Bill Graham's name, you probably know him for best being associated with the iconic music venue, the Fillmore Auditorium. So there was Fillmore West, which was in San Francisco, and Fillmore East. So Graham was the promoter there, directed concerts there from 68 to 71. And it was a venue that drew an eclectic crossroads of the counterculture. And he really became a concert organizer for some of the most major groups at the time, including Jefferson Airplane, Grateful Dead, Jimi Hendrix, among others, and has a tremendous legacy in the rock industry. So just to give you a little bit of a taste there, if any of you are familiar with that very iconic kind of 60s groovy Fillmore poster look, here's one for you. And this is a mention of Andy Warhol, which I thought was fitting as a segue to our next individual, Lou Reed. So Lou Reed, who actually was born with the last name Rabinowitz and changed the last name, became known as a rock visionary. He really became known first with the group The Velvet Underground, which was really an avant-garde kind of group. It did wind up kind of crossing more over into the mainstream and became known as, and still is, one of the most influential bands of that era. So the very late 60s into the 70s. Velvet Underground, because of it being kind of part of this avant-garde scene in New York, was also part of or connected to Andy Warhol's factory, where he made these avant-garde art films. And there was an interesting relationship there. And in fact, Andy Warhol did a couple of album covers for the Velvet Underground. And Lou Reed just goes down in history as just one of those amazing, amazing visionaries that has inspired so many musicians and groups. All right. So, Kiss. Now, this is a great shot here. So we have the two founding members of KISS are in this picture. There is Gene Simmons on the left and Paul Stanley on the right. So Paul Stanley was actually born Harvey Eisen in New York in 1952. He started recording at the age of 15, and he's known as one of America's greatest hard rocking icons. He was the lead vocalist for KISS, played instruments. His stage character, which you can see there, of course, they were kind of an early, well, not really early, fell into that kind of a little bit of that glam rock genre with the makeup and big coiffed hair. So they all had stage personas, and Paul Stanley's was Star Child due to the star over his eye there. But he had a solo career and really was very diverse in his artistic pursuits. He actually spent some time in the theater. He actually had the lead role in a Toronto production of Andrew Lloyd Webber's hit musical Phantom of the Opera. Who knew? So there's a great shot of Paul Stanley in full makeup and costume there. And here we have Gene Simmons. So Gene Simmons was born Chaim Wirtz, and he was actually born in 1949 in Haifa, Israel. He's the only child in the family, and his mother was a Holocaust survivor. Along with Paul Stanley, they formed KISS in 1973. By 77, they were known as the most popular band in America. They actually beat box office records set by the Beatles and Elvis. And little known fact, maybe some of you know, he's fluent in many languages. He actually speaks Hebrew, Hungarian, German, and Japanese. And for those of us who remember that time well, and maybe some who have heard about it, you will know that he was legendary for his 7-inch long tongue. I did not select a portrait to have that protruding here. So you can look that up online should you feel the need to revisit that. So I thought we would end today's crash course with the Beastie Boys. So the Beastie Boys were, of course, a very well-known American hip-hop group from Brooklyn. They actually started out in the punk genre, but then crossed over into hip-hop. They were comprised main members of Mike D. Diamond, Adam MCA Yauch, who unfortunately died in 2012 from cancer, Adam Ad-Rock Horowitz, and the longtime DJ that worked with the group was Michael Mixmaster Mike Schwartz. So a lot of great Jewish boys here in this group that became one of the longest and most influential hip-hop groups in history. And went on to influence many artists, many groups. And I think many of us have some of their iconic tunes in our iPods or what have you, and we like to visit that often. So with that, I'm going to see if I can stop sharing here for a minute, and we're going to go back. Here we are. So thanks so much for being with us today for this Jews Who Rock Part 1 crash course, museum moment. Not a substitute for Summerfest, but hopefully we'll encourage you to crack out the vinyl, the cassette, the CD, what have you, and rock on, if you will. So thanks so much. If you'd like to learn more about what we're doing at Jewish Museum Milwaukee, visit our website, www.jewishmuseummilwaukee.org. And I will look forward to seeing you on Thursday for the second part of Jews Who Rock. Thanks, and have a great rest of the day.